Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar cafe from Alberta Homeschooling Association. Tonight, we're going to talk about unschooling and everything you want to know about self-directed education. Alberta Homeschooling Association is a non-profit organization that was set up to advocate, support, and inform about all the schooling and education choices in the home, whether it's parent controlled or school controlled. If it's in the home, we want to help you make it work for you. So thanks for joining us. My name is Judy Arnall. I am a certified Canadian family life educator. I'm certified in the brain story through Alberta Family Wellness, and I'm also certified in the Growing Brain curriculum from 0 to 5, from 0 to 3. And that's my life is the brain. I am a very big proponent of non-punitive parenting and education. So I've written quite a few books. They're out there in Chapters or your bookstore. They're actually distributed worldwide. So if you want to know anything about non-punitive discipline, or how to raise your kids without anger, or just some day-to-day tips on making life easier, gleaned from 23 years of doing parenting groups, try the tips book. And then the Plugged In Parenting is a DVD that talks about parenting the digital age. Some of them have been translated into different languages. And I've also set up Unschooling Canada Association in about a couple of years ago, to advocate for unschooling across Canada. It's growing worldwide, which is amazing. It's so nice to see. I have a blog too called Unschooling to University, and it's about the book I wrote. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that right now. So when my kids, we unschooled, obviously, when my kids reached the age of starting to think about post-secondary, a lot of their friends and a lot of my friends as kids were in the same boat. So once they all got accepted, I thought, whoa, this needs to be a book, because I knew 30 people in my circle of friends that were unschooling anywhere from 3 to 12 years and got accepted to universities in their programs. So I followed them. Today, out of the 30, about 25 have now graduated their colleges or university programs. We had 10 kids that went into STEM careers, 4 engineers, and 10 kids that went into arts, and 10 kids that went into humanities. So if you're interested, a lot about what I'm going to touch on tonight is in detail in the book. So just a few housekeeping things. We love teachers. Teachers are amazing. Like parents, they work very hard to do their best for each child's learning path. And most of the time, it's probably why we're homeschooling, it's the system that's not effective. And as systems become big and have lots of rules, the child's best interest tends to come last, ahead of bigger problems like funding, resources, those kinds of things. So we are not anti-teacher, we're not anti-education, we are pro-education and pro-teachers as facilitators, just as like parents would be. Okay, what is the problem? So at this point, I'm going to just turn my video off because I keep saying, how does my hair look? Here we go. Stop video. Okay. What do children bring to school, and when do they lose it? Every child who starts school on kindergarten, first day, they bring all these amazing, amazing, passionate skills and attitudes with them. And I remember my one son, he went for the first day of kindergarten, and he came home and he said, that was fun. I'm done. And he was not going back. So when do they lose it? What happens to children's engagement between the ages of 5 and 15? And a lot of times it's a matter of brain development, but most of the time It's that they're not studying what they are interested in. Everybody who's born wants to study. We're born curious. We're born wanting to know about our world and wanting to know how to fit in and make a difference in our world. And what we do is we take them off that track and say, we need you to study this, not what you want, but what we want. And that's where you lose engagement. Worldwide, the high school dropout rate is anywhere from 20 to 40% of secondary school attenders. So what's the solution? How about self-directed education? Now, that doesn't always mean it's self-taught. What it means is that the learner holds the power to decide what they're going to study, when, and if, and how much. So they ultimately have all that power. And from the day they're born to the day they pass from this earth, they always have that power to decide what they want to learn. We just need to empower to let them do that. This is the same kid, by the way, who's looking at a book and also teaching himself how to build computers. Self-directed learning starts the minute a baby's born, and it never ends. Our obligation then as caregivers, parents or teachers, is to prepare our children for the world they're going to inherit, not the world we know. We need problem solvers, we need creative people. And these kids, this digital generation, has content at their fingertips. Absolutely. What they need is what they're going to put that content to work for. I really like this. It says, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life feeling that it's stupid. And that is how our system is today. It's very, very rigid. It is not personal. It is not individual. It is not in each child's best interests. So this is what unschoolers do. This is birth. And for the first 5 years, everybody unschools. Kids, babies, toddlers, preschoolers learn what they want to learn through their play until the age of 6. And that's when our government, our system, our administrators, sometimes our parents say, okay, you can't play anymore. You have to spend the majority of your day going to this place called school. But if you get out of the way, you let kids continue to play, they're going to learn almost everything they need to learn that they would have learned in school. And then when they're considering post-secondary at age 18, they may have to brush up a few gaps, take a few exams, and prove their qualifications to enter university. That's what the 30 kids that I wrote the book on have done. That's what unschoolers do. Now, it's not to say kids don't learn through their play. If you look here, school is only one way that people learn things, but look at all the other ways people learn. There are many ways. So basically, there's 3 ways to get an education. There's school, which is government controlled. There's homeschooling, which is parent controlled. And then there's unschooling, which is learner controlled. But now, thanks to the internet and digital technologies, students are really borderless. In Alberta, parents have to provide an education, but it doesn't mean they have to actually teach it. And if you're like me, I really hated to teach in the conventional way that you think homeschoolers teach. You know, the kids sitting around the kitchen table with their workbooks and me or mom standing at the whiteboard trying to teach things. I hated that because most of the time my kids didn't want to learn what I wanted to teach them. They would fight with each other, they'd cry, they'd dawdle, they'd flat out just refuse to do anything. And I didn't want to send them back to school. So more and more, we became homeschoolers that never got around to homeschooling. We went out on field trips, we traveled, We played games, we read books, we did internet research, we had fun. And that is the essence of borderless students, is that they do not have to be constrained by a country, by a government, or by a province. Kids can learn from any course or resource anywhere in the world. And boundaries and regulation, more and more, is becoming less important. Now, the future is improving those qualifications of learning from those many areas and places they learn from. So think of education as a buffet, and whether the child fills their plate with broccoli, such as math, or the chocolate brownies, which is the video games, it doesn't matter. They decide how much of everything to fill their plate with. And just like we teach parents in trusting children to eat the foods that are good for their body, the same thing applies here. We trust kids to pick and choose what they need to learn when they need it in their own time frame. And it is about trust. And I believe it. I know it's hard for you to trust that your child's going to learn everything they need to learn. And it's easy for me to say because now I have hindsight, but it's a big jump and you can do it. So unschooling is a philosophy and lifestyle of educational freedom in which a child's natural curiosity and motivation, nurtured in a rich and stimulating environment, will lead the child to learn what he or she needs to know in the time frame he or she needs it. And the key here is motivated. The child has to be motivated. Now, in the Alberta education world, unschooling is a term we parents use in homeschooling. But in school, it's called self-directed education. So I'll share a little bit about our story. My two oldest children, I have 5 kids, they actually went to grade 1 and 2. One had a learning disability and the other one was quite smart, and both of them didn't have their needs met in the classroom. So more and more, they would come home and they'd say, this is a picture of my one son who wanted to plant an egg and see if it grew an egg tree. And I kind of thought, okay. So after school, more and more, I was doing after schooling, which is teaching the kids what they wanted to know. And it was a real eye-opener for me because I had this model of kids' brains that you unzip their head, you're pouring in all this information and content, you zip it up, and it stays in their long-term memory. No. The more and more we know about brains is that a lot of what children learn doesn't stay in their long-term memory unless it's something very rare and out of the ordinary. And it's usually in the teen years when they start remembering those things. That's not to say what they learn when they're kids doesn't stimulate their neurons. It does. But there are many other things that can stimulate those neurons and grow them too, such as video games, reading stories, and traveling. So that's what we did. So then I pulled them out of school and I did the traditional homeschooling. And like I said, my kids started not listening to me. As you can see, my engineering son wrote on his grade 2 math book, I hate mathematics, because he hated doing textbooks and workbooks. And I hated teaching someone who didn't want to learn. So more and more we just, I had a baby underfoot. I had a toddler I was nursing. I was really busy with a partner who would be traveling out of the country all the time. And we just never got around to formal work. So we played for 10 wonderful years, best years of my life. We played and they kept on learning. So it's kind of the role of the adult moving from the teacher to the facilitator. And we do that already in adult learning. We don't really apply that to kids. We say kids are dependent learners, but they're not. If you let them go, they are self-directed and independent learners. So these are kind of the differences. I'm not going to go through these, but you can freeze this later and look at them. So then my kids did write diploma exams because you need course marks to go to university. Their average on 21 diploma exams was 78%, and 9 of those exams were in the STEM subjects. The provincial average is about 65%. So unschoolers do well, absolutely do well. And I was talking about the 30 people in my book. They do well too. Learners do not need 16 years of formal education. What happens is it burns kids out by about the time of late junior high, high school. Those are the years that count. Those are the years kids should be gearing up for learning, not burning out. We all know children of all ages need more play in their lives, downtime, just time to just willow away, because that's when the brain really works, and that's when creativity hits and problem solving. When the brain is not forced to work, it's relaxed. So what's a little bit about the research? There's not a lot of research out there because unschoolers dislike taking exams because exams are written on prescribed curriculum. So if you don't have prescribed curriculum or you're not following one, it's very hard to get good marks on exams. So there's 2 famous schools. There's the Sudbury Valley School in Massachusetts. There's a Summerhill School in UK, which has been operating 93 years now, maybe more. And there's lots of free schools worldwide that is good evidence that self-directed education works in a school setting. Oop, why is it sticking? Okay. The Fraser Report is very good, although it doesn't focus on unschoolers, but it focuses on homeschooling. What I liked about that is that there is no advantage if parents or certified teachers are not, and that the primary models of behavior are adults rather than peers. Dr. Peter Gray is a professor in psychology at Boston College. His research on 75 unschoolers showed, and this was interesting, the least structured education children had from ages 0 to 18, the more likely they would be to go on and succeed at post-secondary schools. And when he talked about structure, he talked about schools as well as homeschooling, structured homeschooling. So the more children had incentive and motivation to study what they wanted growing up, the more they knew what their passions were and looked forward to studying it in post-secondary. Okay, and this is my book I've talked about. And children of all ages need more adults in their lives. Dr. Peter Gray, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, Pat Ferenga, and Sir Ken Robinson all suggest that children need adults too. A life of just institutions and peers is not the best for healthy brain development. Children do need adults in their lives as well. So I'm going to just touch a little bit about why unschooling works so well for brain development. So brains start developing physically, mostly before the child's born. Neurons connect with other neurons. The axons and the dendrites send neurotransmitters over a gap called a synapse, and this forms a pathway. So every time a child learns something or repeats something, the pathways get stronger. This happens most until about age 6, which is why if that amount of brain development and growth is happening in the first 6 years, I wonder why education really needs to be regulated at age 6, because we don't regulate it from 0 to age 6. Why should we regulate it from 7 to 16 when most of that brain growth is happening in the first 5 years? So then you can see here from age 7 onward, the brain has to prune too many connections in order to work more efficiently on the connections that are repeated. So for example, if a child learns Chinese, to speak Chinese in their early years, and then they attend a school that's totally English and nobody continues to speak Chinese to them at home, they will lose their ability to speak Chinese. So everything that children learn has to be reinforced in those school age years to retain it. So play is a valuable way of getting educated. So when people say to me, how can they suddenly at age 18 decide to write those exams if they have not studied what other kids have spent 12 years in school studying? So what I tend to do is I ask people, okay, name a career. Let's say your 17-year-old has come up from your basement, quit his video games and said, Mom, I want to be, and name a career. Most often what I get when I do this live is somebody throws it out there saying, doctor. Okay, well, let's look at doctor. Okay, so that 17-year-old, these are the courses they would need for preparing for a first degree. In Alberta and across Canada, doctors need a first degree and then they go to medical school. So a first degree in science, let's say. All that child would need is to prove qualifications or write the exams in 10 courses. They would need English 30, and for that is a standalone course. They could read the key and write the diploma exam. They need social, again, read the key and write the exam. Chemistry, they would need both grade 11 and grade 12 chemistry. So 2 courses there. They would need biology 30, which is 1 course. It stands alone, so they wouldn't need the grade 11. They would need math, probably, well, my kids in STEM took their first math course in grade 8, because grade 8 is a really good course for bridging between what kids have learned through play for 13 years and what they're going to start to need to know for higher math, algebra, and linear equations and all those things. So grade 8 is a foundational course, and then we skipped grade 9 and then took high school math, grade 10, 11, 12, especially in STEM careers. That does build. In some disciplines such as engineering, they need math 31, but they can also take that at university. So 10 courses, they can do it in 2.5, maybe 3 years. So that 17-year-old will be 20 and can head right into post-secondary, okay? So what you're probably questioning now is, how can they just learn all that here? But what we say, when they are playing, they're also learning through play. So a child who's 13 has very good math skills, even though they have never done a textbook or workbook, just because they may have done a lemonade stand, they buy things, they know money, they cook, they understand fractions, they have all that foundational base there. So they're not starting from age 6, grade 1, they're starting from grade 8 right here and heading into more high school advanced math, okay? Okay, so for most courses, kids can pick up any kind of biology or science book, study the key, because the key is what the exams. Now the diploma exams are only on the grade 12 courses. So they would write the biology 30 diploma exam, and this would help them study what they need. And all kids need to add motivation. That's it. Absolutely. So kids develop within the context of relationships in all these areas. And as you can see, this is the developmental of the prefrontal cortex. And you can see there's a big leap in executive function and self-control about age 13. And then you see it again, another big leap on the cusp of age 17. And I've noticed that too among the team of 30 I talk about in the book, is that most kids tend to buckle down and think, okay, where do I want to go? What do I want to do for my life work? What do I need to get there? And they're a lot more serious and motivated at that age. And if not, it continues. A lot of children don't hit that till they're 25, but at least they know where they're heading and they don't waste courses. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly not go through all this stuff here. But let's talk about school agers. Okay, so all these concepts of math kids learn through play. Yeah. And even these they learn a lot about through play. Coordinates, battleship, rounding every time you're shopping, those kinds of things. Playing with a sundial, angle properties, or things like that. They all learn it through play. Now, paper math is where they actually learn to do calculations on paper. So they're going to need this, and that can certainly begin at age 13. 13 is that magical age when kids get their abstract thinking skills, and a lot of what they learn sticks. And they're also more motivated to pursue paper-based work. Okay, so it's coming, absolutely coming. Okay, I'm going to just explain a little more about unschooling. It's knowledge acquired on a need-to-know time frame as determined by the learner. Okay, so when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Your child may come and say, I want to learn more about violin. And your role is to help them learn more about violin until their interest stops or fades away. Questions. So a lot of times people worry about music lessons or language lessons. And I gave my kids lessons way too early. It drilled the fun out of it. They quit lessons, they quit practicing. And I said to myself, you know what, I'm not getting you any more lessons until you beg me 3 times. Now, it took them till about age 16, 17, and 15. And they asked me quite a few times, and then I was willing to write checks and drive them to lessons. And they did. They picked up violin, piano, guitar, and they got lessons. And after about 2 years, they quit lessons and continued to self-teach themselves music. Same with languages. My kids didn't learn after our little stint in French immersion. When we dropped out of grade 2, the kids didn't learn any languages until their early 20s. They took it in university or they self-taught. So, and they're quite good in those languages. So unschooling is self-directed education, but the child determines the pace, the content, the delivery, the time, and the assessment. It's facilitator attentiveness to needs for children's learning. It's determined totally by the child. If a child wants to learn through textbooks or courses or playing video games. And the big key is if there are any motivation problems at all, it is not self-directed learning and it's not unschooling. Okay, absolutely not. Unschooling is not permissive. A parent or adult acts as an attentive mentor or facilitator that provides resources. Permissiveness is inattentive neglect, and that is not unschooling. And it's not well researched yet, like I said, because unschoolers do not take a whole lot of testing. But it doesn't mean unschooling is not uneducated. Children who unschool learn as much or more as children in structured learning environments. They can go deep into subject areas, or they could not. It doesn't matter. But the learning stick because they're intrinsically motivated. So how do you unschool? You just provide plenty of unstructured time and you offer whatever's around your house. Lots of things to learn. Okay. What do kids do all day? Well, these are some things they do: read, research, play, game, chores, field trips, travel, cook, crafts, projects, volunteering, run a small business. I will say again, they play a lot of video games and they learn a lot through them. What about university? Okay, there's at least 14 ways to get in. I'm not going to have time to cover them tonight, but if you go to the Canadian Homeschool Conference, I recorded a 1-hour session there. It's going to be offered the first week in February on the 14 ways in. Probably the most common ways in is to write the diploma exams, go to a community college, or just get your 5 grade 12 courses. Every university across Canada, every major university, does not require a diploma to admit students. They require 4 core courses and an option, and probably competitive marks depending on the program. So a lot of kids head to college and transfer in, or they just write the 5 courses and apply. Okay, I talked about that. I talked about that. I talked about that. I talked about play. I'm not going to talk about that, other than play has decreased much to the... Okay, I think it's important to understand who's doing the inquiry and who's doing the direction. Inquiry-based learning in some schools doesn't give kids the lateral ability to make decisions as much as you can at home. So sometimes in school, what they call self-directed learning isn't really, because the kids are not that motivated. They may say, well, what area of bats do you wish to study? Where true self-directed education is, are you even interested in learning about bats? And if the answer is no, then you let it go. Okay. The role of the caregiver, I think Dave Hancock, the former Minister of Education, said it best. Teachers must give up being the sage on the stage to be the guide on the side. So the role of the facilitator, caregiver, is show how to get resources, offer but not impose resources, model curiosity, observe children, help make them connections, allow boredom to exist, because that motivates kids in action. Take time for interests, and when you're worried, look for outside support. Okay, let's look at practical considerations for Alberta. One of the requirements is in Alberta is that we have to fill out an education plan at the beginning of the year. Now, this is not written in stone. You can change this every week if you want. You can make changes, you can add more resources, you can change your assessment, and then you just change it and email it to your facilitator and they'll file it, and that's it. So I don't understand the necessity of an education plan when it's not written in stone. We can make changes anytime we want. What a lot of unschoolers do is they use the same plan every year, because a lot of times they go to the science center every year. So a lot of resources they use don't change. Now, unschooling is a methodology. It is a legal, valid methodology of education. So it's totally doable with any school board, okay? They must support you if you're choosing to unschool, or, to use their terminology, to have your child use self-directed education. So in the learning plan, you just look at these very, very open, flexible outcomes, put down the resources you want. For example, let's pick one in science. Understand the scientific method, the nature of science and technology, and their application to daily life. Okay, right there. You could put groceries here as resources, because your child's going to learn how to cook in the kitchen and understand the scientific method and science through that. Assessment will be talking about how the product turned out. And that's it. The methodology is going to be self-directed learning. So this is what I tend to put on our education plans. I put down a little paragraph, philosophical goals. We want our son to pursue subjects according to his interests and learn and grow through self-directed initiatives. Under resources, I put down, we may use the following. So you want to put down resources you want to claim in your reimbursement, and you can use them, you may not use them, whatever. Assessment is, I use photographs. So if my child's going to make a nice batch of chocolate chip cookies, I'm going to take a picture of it. And then I have something to show my facilitator at the end of the year. You can do narrative observation. That to me is too much work. Just throw things in a portfolio, keep your library receipts, class certificates, when they go to Home Depot and build those little wood projects. Anything, video, writing, math samples, whatever. And I hand it to my facilitator if he or she wants to see it. And pretty well that's it. That's all we do. We tend not to go subject by subject, even though these are somewhat divided into subjects. So for example, English language arts is here. This is math. This is science. This is social studies. And this is art, health, technology, and group skills. So, but keep in mind, they don't have to finish this until they're age 20. So it's very flexible. Okay. Now, we kind of reverse our assessment. So in a traditional school, what happens is the teacher studies the learning outcomes, they plan lessons, they deliver, they evaluate and assess, and then they report learning outcomes. We turn that inversely and we go backwards. The child plays, and then we observe closely, decide which learning outcomes are touched on in the education plan, record our assessment, and report that to our facilitator. So it's much different than the school model and what they teach in education degrees in university. So you need a facilitator on board who understands the uniqueness of unschooling. For high school, what we did is we self-designed our courses based on interest. So we did what we call bookends. We put forth a course proposal so that it would meet our child's interests, but also meet the outcomes because we wanted credits. So we did that and listed our resources, just one page. And then at the end of the 125 hours they spent on the course, we gathered our evidence, filed a course evaluation, and submitted a mark. And that is how we did high school. When the kids didn't need to do much of a course, maybe they were very talented in a subject, we just went right to the diploma exams in grade 12. So like I said, no university asks for a diploma, but they do ask for courses and marks. So when kids take grade 12 courses, that's pretty well all the fields the universities ask for. Okay, just a few quick common concerns. I'm not going to go through these, but these are common myths. Learners need teachers. Sometimes if they want teachers, that's great, but most likely when they're younger children, they need facilitators. Children need adults to occupy their time. Nope. Their educational resources and junk resources. No. Everything teaches. Even a video game such as Call of Duty teaches a child some skills in that education plan. And Lego is one. I think one of the school authorities has educational Lego as reimbursable. I'm like, okay, when you're taking apart the pieces, how do you know which ones are educational and which ones are junk? Doesn't make sense to me. But no, there's no division. Everything a person encounters in life is educational in some way. And that's why unschooling is a lifestyle. It never ends. Learning and socialization can only occur in school. Again, no. play is frivolous and time-wasting? No, it's educational. Early education and more of it is good? Well, it happens. It's just more self-directed. Kids won't learn a work ethic if they're not trained early? Nuh-uh. As soon as that prefrontal cortex is developing around 17, 18, when kids need to do something, they'll do it. They don't need years of practice. I remember listening to that when my kids would sleep till 1, 2 o'clock as teenagers and grow their brains. And people would say, well, how are they ever going to get up for a job? Well, when the time came for them to get up for 8 a.m. university courses or a job, they do it. They do it when they need it. Kids won't learn the basics? No, of course they do. Kids have too much power when they choose what to study. Not really. Kids have the power already. We are just recognizing that we cannot force a child to learn. We can't stop a child from learning. We can't force them. They have the power already. Here are some popular games and how it feels outcomes of inspiring education. So I use this a lot for helping teachers figure out that, yes, resources can be anything at all. How do kids learn math? They learn math by solving problems. The day we got less than half a cheesecake from the restaurant we ordered was a prime opportunity to teach the kids how to do pi on paper, how to figure out circumference on paper. And we got to eat the results. And we also got the restaurant to give us a credit. But that's real life. What about reading? Again, that's a developmental self-skill. Like toilet training, every child has an inborn developmental agenda of when they're going to crack the code. Some do it at 4, some do it at 12, but every child learns to read. We live in a literate, saturated world. They cannot help but not want to learn how to sound out letters. And they learn. And by the time they're in their teen years and reading, you can't tell who started at 4 and who started at 10 because they're reading deep material. Science and social, best taught without a workbook. Science, again, like math, is all around us in daily life. And kids need that 3-dimensional experiential ability to understand scientific concepts later in high school. They need to understand it with their fingers, their 5 senses in the earlier years. And social studies, the best place is using Google Earth or traveling or going on field trips to understand things that come alive in real life. This is my son at the Dachau concentration camp in Germany, and that was so much more powerful to visit that than to read about it in a textbook. And like I said about music and languages. Common concern is, what if they miss out? Okay, well, here's a good example. None of my kids learned how to handwrite. They went into university with this kind of chicken scratch on the right. And they recognized that the university professors would not let them use laptops. They had to handwrite exams, and they were timed exams. So they were losing marks. The motivation hits, they need to learn cursive. So this was what they were doing in 3 months of motivation. So this was September, this was by Christmas. So when the need is there, the motivation is there. There's some great advantages of unschooling, and one of that is that motivation is never a problem. The child is already developmentally ready. There's no learning anxiety. The child understands rather than memorizes. They develop independence, self-reliance, and responsibility, and learn how to access information. Absorption of material is high. You don't have to make lesson plans. There's no power struggles. And a love of learning for its intrinsic value is developed. Creativity, initiative, decision-making, and problem-solving is enhanced, and it covers all learning styles. Yeah, there's some disadvantages. Interests erupt at inconvenient times, like, when you're winding down and wanting to go to bed, your child wants to go plant an egg to see if it grows an egg tree. Cost may be a barrier for some things kids want to do, maybe hiring tutors over the internet. Learning is invisible and difficult to measure. This is hard for us to stand up and advocate for our kids against the world of administration in education. And that leads for us, it's difficult to trust those dry spells between where we can't see evidence of observable learning. We know our brains are percolating, our children's brains are percolating, but we don't have the evidence. And we have to trust that they are getting what they need. Isn't that giving too much power to a child? Well, children already have power. When they're little, they act out. When they're teens, they tune out. And when they're old enough, they drop out. Everybody owns their education from the moment they're born. We unschoolers just hand it over to them a lot sooner than when kids in school get it. Okay, and our last little bit is, what if they play video games all day? They might. I have a son now who works for a major video game manufacturer, and he was probably the one I worried about the most for addiction problems. But he was just good. He loved computers. It was his passion. He loved video gaming. And I hate to say, all 5 of our kids are gamers. They spent a lot of time video gaming. And a lot of the video games spurred interest into learning other things. So I talk about this in my book too, is how, playing Age of Empires or, I'm forgetting a lot of the games now, The Sims, or there's so many awesome video games like Civilization and Zelda and World of Warcraft. Help them to make costumes and crafts and write stories and put on plays and do amazing, amazing things that were evidence of their learning. They also learned all these things: cooperation, commitment, teamwork, critical thinking, problem solving, innovation, creativity. Really good skills. And again, back to the brain development and self-control. Self-control is that flexibility, plan B, working memory, and focus. When they reached the age of about 17, they were good. You could say to them, you know what? You need to go to your job now. And they would put the video games on hold. Or if they had an exam in university, they knew that they had to put off gaming and get to work and study. And they had that brain development and executive function in order to do that. As long as, you have other things in your life. So I'm going to just wrap it up here. Can play replace school? Absolutely it can. We are all inborn play people. We love to play, and we need to allow our children to play. And they learn through their play much more than if we impose textbooks and workbooks when they don't want them. I'm going to end with my favorite poem. It's by Anonymous. I tried to teach my child with words. They often passed him by unheard. I tried to teach my child with books. He only gave me puzzled looks. Despairingly, I turned aside. How can I teach this child? I cried. Into my hand he placed the key. Come, he said, and play with me. Which is really nice. So my book is for sale, and if you want to order it directly from me, you can send me $30 to my email address and e-transfer it. And then I don't have to pay Amazon, but that includes shipping. I'll ship it out to you, a signed copy. And you will get all this. You will, it's 384 pages. You don't have to read it back to back, but we cover all the 61 benefits of unschooling over homeschooling in school. We cover lots of ideas of what your role is, what resources to you, how to structure time, and how to handle assessment. Then we cover each chapter at different brain development stages. So we cover the learning and brain development and what occurs in those ages. So the pros and cons of online learning, how to do high school, how to get together a portfolio, and then what to expect in the post-secondary years. And so here's my email address, it's jarnall@shaw.ca. If you want to send me $30, I will send out those books. If you're watching this as a recording, absolutely, you can take advantage of that offer too anytime. Amazon is being very interesting right now, so I would like to get a copy of the book in your hands if you want it. So at this point, I want to thank you for coming, and I'm going to open it up to questions. I might leave the recording on just because a lot of good stuff comes out in questions. So if you want to ask any questions, feel free to write them in the chat box or the Q&A, and I can answer them. Hmm. Oh, thank you. If you need to leave, that's okay. You can also email me too if you have a question, or if you're having, if it hits later. It often does. Okay, I think at this point, I'm just going to turn off the recording here. Okay, the question is, what is a good way to start unschooling as we are fully parent directed, but my daughter doesn't seem to desire more than workbooks? So unschooling is just following what your daughter wants to do. So um, if she wants to do workbooks, then keep on doing it. And there are kids that love workbooks, but there are also a lot of kids that don't. So it's just taking the cue of what your child wants to do, and it's the easiest thing in the world. It's super easy, but it's hard because we sometimes question, well, is that good enough? Is that what we do? But yeah, just try it for a bit. Just go with whatever she wants to do, and keep doing it. Another question is, how do you explain unschooling to relatives who already think homeschooling is insane? Oh boy, you don't. I didn't even come out as an unschooler till my kids were applying to universities, just because people do not understand it. It's so outside of their comprehension, where there's a lot of bias against homeschooling even, and unschooling is just even now, when I tell people I've written a 386-page book on self-directed education, they still can't understand how anyone could do that. So, so I wouldn't explain it. I would just stick with the homeschooling thing, because remember, unschooling is just a subset of homeschooling. It's a methodology, right? It's how you educate. You're empowering the learner to self-direct their education. So, yeah, work with homeschooling. Um, Another question is, how much time are you allowed for kids for video games? Oh boy. Parents out there run the gamut from absolute no limits. I was one of them, to putting on strict limits. And that's for unschoolers too. There are unschoolers who really are firm on that, and there are unschoolers who are really like, you know what? We all game, we all love it, we all learn from it. It's good, it's fine. So I didn't restrict my kids. And believe me, some days they played 16 hours a day. Yep. It's something they love to do even now in their spare time. They love to video game, but they still find time for other things like socializing and chores and jobs and relationships. So unless I would love to do another, oh yeah, we do. Actually in July we talk about video games for our webinar cafe for Alberta homeschooling. But most kids are not addicted to video games no matter how many hours they play. Addiction is a brain impairment, and that's contributed to by adverse childhood experiences, by trauma, by violence, by neglect. And most home education parents, including unschooling parents, are very nurturing, kind, and have healthy home environments. So no matter how many hours those kids video game, it doesn't give them a propensity for addiction. Okay, question. What if your child is 14 and doesn't really want to do anything after being in public school for 2 years? The consensus is to let your kids de-school about 1 month for every year they've been in public school. So so what that is, de-schooling is let them just veg. Let them do what they want to do. And after a while, you will notice they will start doing something that looks like they're taking control of their education. But it is hard to be patient and wait for it to happen. And every learner gets to that point at some point. So, you know, at 14, that's quite a few years in school. That would be about 7 years in school. So could be about 7 months. So maybe see how that goes. Question. Once your kids made it to high school, how many hours are spent per day on textbook style learning like math? My kids never spent more than an hour and a half a day on textbook learning in high school. They either worked on their own through textbooks, or they did an online course, or they, if they were really good, like my daughter was very good at English, she didn't need an English course, so she would just write a few essays and submit them for course marks, and then just write the diploma exams. So high school is generally, if they're putting together portfolios for 2 core courses and an option, it shouldn't take more than about 2 hours a day. Okay, another question. How do unschooled kids apply for university? Like I said, what they do is they write the diploma exams for the 4 core courses: math, English, social, science, and an option. Although an option, they would just do like Phys Ed 30. You just do physical activity and get marks for Phys Ed 30. They do it under self-directed high school. So a lot of, or through online courses if they do. But online courses, you have to follow the school curriculum. Self-directed, you don't have to. You can very much make that personalized and fit what the children's interests are. Are there necessary equivalencies? Most of the major universities from University of Victoria to MUN across Canada want the grade 12 courses. They don't want to see portfolios, because most universities you apply online and there's no space to put community service or volunteer work or how great your child is. They only want to see courses, and the numbers actually come up automatically based on the province. So they want to see those. Or they go to community colleges and get community college first year levels and then transfer over. Do you need to register somehow to Unschool? No, you just have to follow the the guidelines for homeschooling in Alberta. So you have to register with a school authority to supervise your home education program. And at this point in time, we're in January, if you're with a school right now, you stay with the school and just file a home education notification form. And then this summer, shop around and see which school you'd like to sign up for, school authority, that would support your unschooling program. Okay, a question. Do you have any suggestions to help with my mindset to shift out of workbooks to unschooling? I guess deschool the parents. Common wisdom there is to get a job, have a baby, get something that you're busy with. And then, boy, it really takes the focus off your kids. And it's really hard because I know I'm a real workbook person. I love workbooks. I would love my kids to do their little 10 pages a day and then we're done and then we do the fun stuff. But my kids are not that way. So I really had to pour my structure and need for order into my work so I could let go of the kids. And I think it's just another thing you can do is really, really observe your children and look to see how much they learn through their play, whether it's board games, video games, they're playing with toys. Look for how much they learn and make notes or take a picture of it. And that way, at the end of the year, you have something to show your facilitator and say, oh yeah, my child did all this. And they can translate it into their paperwork that they file with the school. Okay, question is, during the early years, how did you teach your kids to read? Did they learn letters and sounds right away or later? I had my kids learn to read at age 4, 5, 7, 9, and 10. And the 9 and 10-year-old, I was getting pressure from my school authority to start teaching them letters. And I tried, I did some of that, and they were in tears because they weren't getting it. And I was in tears because I thought, I need to trust my instincts and know that they're going to teach themselves to read. Every child teaches themselves to read. You don't have to teach kids to read. And eventually, the 9 and 10-year-old cracked the code and they learned to read. I didn't have to do any phonics with them. They did it on their own. And now they're very good readers. They read off the internet every day. They read, read, read. And if you pressure them, you're going to make them feel stupid. So I would suggest letting it happen. Just like every child is going to learn to go to sleep at night, and every child's going to learn to toilet train. Every child's going to learn to read. Just be patient. Question, what did your average day structure look like in the early years? How early were they video gaming? Oh boy, confession time. My kids were video gaming from age 2 on. Now, I do know that from my work that young children do need a lot of time reading, parents talking to them, a lot of conversations. So I made sure they had a lot of conversations and communication. But they did game a lot too. So our average day structure looked like the little kids would get up super early and I'd get up and then I get on my computer and they'd get on their computers, or they'd play Lego, or they'd watch Zaboomafoo or something. And then I would do my email, and then we'd all eventually have breakfast. And then we usually went out for activities in the morning when they were little. When I say little, they were not teens yet. So we did a lot of activities in the morning, and then in the afternoon, the younger ones had nap, and then we'd just stay at home and watch movies or play board games, or they would play with toys. And then the evenings, like every Monday, we'd go to the library. That would be our library day. And then they'd come with me. We'd go shopping, we'd go do errands, we'd go to homeschooling events. As the kids got older, they, about age 12, 13, they didn't want to sign up anymore for activities. They didn't want to sign up for lessons. They didn't want to sign up for homeschooling fun things that I wanted to go to, but they didn't want to go to. And they slept later. So anything we did actually go to had to be in the afternoon. Because, that's the best thing about homeschooling is teenagers can sleep and they stay up later. So a lot too, when they did more formal work, they would do it at night when I was tired. So I couldn't really help them either. So they either had to find the answers themselves on the internet through Khan Academy or through the textbooks, or asking their friends, because I couldn't teach it. My math ends at grade 7. So they had to find the help themselves. And that was very good practice for university because I wasn't spoon feeding them. So that's kind of what our average day looked like. So even now, I go to bed about 11, and my unschooled 17-year-old goes to bed at 1 o'clock. But our best time right now is he gets up by 11 and he video games. And then we have lunch about 1 because that's his breakfast. And then we do a little bit of math right now because he's doing high school math and science. So we do that. And we do no more than an hour a day. And that's it. The rest of the day is his for learning and doing whatever. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I probably didn't mention, but my 3 university graduates we have an engineer, and he's the guy who's working for the major video game company right now in Germany. And then I have a registered nurse, and he was the child who had learning disabilities. So doing it his way really, really helped him learn and feel confident as a learner. And then my other child is, she's a graduate in English studies at university, and she's working now in a career job. And my 4th child is at university right now in sciences, and he's not too sure he likes it, so we don't know. And then my last child is 17 and working at Self-Design High School. So that's oh, good. I'm glad you liked it. Last, here's a question. Can you suggest ways to engage your kids into finding activities they enjoy, or is purely just based on when it comes up? I would notice activities that I think my kids would be interested in, and I would get their consent always, because then you're not really unschooling if you sign them up against their will. So I would encourage them to go. Sometimes after 1 or 2 times they'd hate it. I would strongly encourage them to go about 3 times, and then if they hated it, we wouldn't go back. And then we'd try again, maybe in a year, especially, when kids are 8, 9, 10, things change. They might want to do something, try something new. So and it's good socialization too. If they tended to like things that their friends did, and we hung out with other unschoolers, so a lot of times their activities would be we would book a play place and they would just free play. They'd make up games and stories and act out scenarios, and nothing would be adult directed. And they really, really enjoyed that. So other things is I would invite kids over to my house. So Friday afternoons was always a gaming time. So kids would come over, the parents would bring snack, and my kids really liked that. And that would have been, activities. Or my daughter wanted to start a book club, so we did that. Yeah. Okay, so another question. So no spelling or punctuation instruction happened. Yes, that's true. I did not teach spelling, grammar, or punctuation. Actually, one of the best video games for teaching the kids that was it was called Gary's Mod in the 90s. And whenever they wrote in the video game, Gary would penalize them for bad grammar and spelling. So my kids are motivated to look things up on their own. But no spelling or punctuation instruction, and they write very well now. They write academic writing. I would love to show you some essays from university, 15-page essays or research papers. They learned it all on their own. No instruction. Um, yeah, and a lot of my kids didn't even do a full English 30 course where, they teach a little bit of that in English 10, 20, 30, but if they're not going to use it, they're not going to remember it. So best way to learn that is to write and look up your conventions and look up your editing. So I'm the worst speller and punctuation right now, my kids. But I have the best handwriting. Okay, that looks like it for questions. So yeah, again, thank you so much for coming, and stay tuned for our webinar in January, which is just Homeschooling 101, I think. And yeah, and feel free to contact me if you want to. And that's good. Thank you for coming, and take care. Happy New Year, and enjoy the journey. It is so wonderful. It's the best years ever. And to do those years without fighting and pain and tears is very, very nice. Get out there, have fun, and learn together. And remember, you can't stop kids from learning, and you can't force them to learn. They own it. Okay, happy unschooling. Bye-bye.